Thank you, Brandy. I am so excited today to announce and to introduce to you our panel members for our very first panel, Education During the Age of COVID-19 and Beyond. First off, I would like to introduce Dr. Olin Odekoven. Dr. Olin is president and CEO of Peregrine Leadership Institute and Peregrine Academic Services located in Gillette, Wyoming. The Leadership Institute conducts leadership development workshops and seminars, human resource management consulting, and employee team development sessions. Dr. Olin also has over 30 years of leadership and academic experience at all organizational levels. This year, Dr. Odekoven and his team have developed an online instructional course and module set that's called Leading Edge Learning, competency-based modules that will be helpful to so many people. Peregrine has over 800 hours of instructional modules that are used for employee development, corporate training, and higher education. The catalog is attached if you would like to see it on our website. We are currently working on a new book, Dr. Odekoven and team is, related to employee retention with the expected release date of mid-2021. Dr. Odekoven, please open your mic and greet us today.
Hey, well, welcome everybody to this year's Thought Leader Summit, our fourth Thought Leader Summit. Glad to be with you today and look forward to our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I am thrilled to introduce to you Professor Halisi C. Ngambi, coming to us all the way from Zambia. Dr. Lisi is a full professor of business leadership. She is currently the vice chancellor at Mulungushi University and Kwame Nkrumah University, and she is the first woman to be appointed in such a position in the Republic of Zambia. This is an awesome point. She was the consecutive winner of the CEO Africa's Most Influential Woman of the Year Award in Government and Business, and the 2017 Continental Lifetime Achiever Award. She also has recently co-published a book. She is a contributor to a book called Management Principles, a contemporary edition for Africa. Dr. Lisi's contributions focus on managing diversity and inclusion. Very exciting. Welcome, Dr. Lisi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adi. I thank you and good morning to you. As here it's in the evening, so I can say good morning to you and all the panelists. Thank you for having me. I'm humbled. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lisi. I'm thrilled to introduce Mr. Mark Mills. Mr. Mark Mills has been president of Digital Power Group since 2001, and he operates the website techpundit.com. He is a faculty fellow at the McCormick School of Engineering and Applied Science at Northwestern University. He's also a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and a strategic partner at Cottonwood Venture Partners. He is an investment firm focused on technological advancements in oil and gas production, and he also serves on the advisory board of the Notre Dame Riley Center for Science, Technology, and Values. Mr. Mark Mills is very busy. And Mark, I do see I said doctor in front, hint, hint. Mr. Mark focused on future forward. He's always focused on future forward, and he always explores the next direction in technology, engineering, and physics. Welcome, Mr. Mark Mills.
Delighted to join you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a honor to join such an esteemed panel. Dr. Ivy, thanks for having me here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. I'm excited to introduce Dr. Jeanette Patterson, a dear friend of mine. Dr. Jeanette Patterson serves as the Director of Equity for Adams 14 School District. Starting her 28th year in education, Dr. Patterson has been a district administrator, principal, and assistant principal, teacher, and an educational consultant. She has done it all. Recently, Dr. Patterson has coordinated a grant project called Race Policing and Community Justice Advocates In that capacity, she trained high school students how to facilitate conversations with their peers about race relations, policing, and social justice concerns in the community. Welcome, Dr. Patterson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ivy, for inviting me to this panel. I am looking forward to talking with you about public education today. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, I would like to introduce Ms. Aubrey Carath. Aubrey has been working in education in different facets since 2003. After obtaining a degree in human development from the University of California, she opened and operated her own preschool daycare. The program included working with the children from 6 weeks old to 8 years old. And now she enjoys teaching in our teaching process here at Ashford University. And she also enjoys traveling, photography, scrapbooking, the memories of her travels. Aubrey has been to 17 countries, speaking of travel, and she likes to say, I haven't been everywhere, but that's on my list too. So welcome, Aubrey.
Thank you, everyone, for having me, and I look forward to being in such great company.
So we're going to get into this great conversation here. We all know that the spread of COVID-19 has been catastrophic in so many different ways and many different events. And the area of education has been impacted as well. The impact of all of these changes has been felt in a wide array of policy areas, higher education. Education has really been rocked by COVID-19. Starting with our first question, and it's going to go to Dr. Olin. What do you see are some of the biggest challenges to our educational system due to COVID-19 and other impacts?
All right. Well, thank you, Karen. Given this question some thought over the last couple of days, I think many of us probably either personally or have team members who have experienced this, but just that at-home stress. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've dealt with over the last several months is the stress that's been created with the kiddos coming back into the home and a home learning environment, the disruption to that family dynamic. How does that work and function? And certainly it's not lost on me, even with our team members here at work. Many of them had to go through this process of dealing with that family life disruption and try to deliver education as a consequence. The second big issue, the second big challenge that I've observed over the last several months has been access to education in rural and poor families and communities. We all kind of went into the pandemic, many of us thinking, hey, life is good. We all got internet, what's the big deal? The sad reality is there was a lot of people across our country and indeed around the world that just didn't have that access like many of us enjoy. I live in a very rural area here in Northeast Wyoming. I didn't really think much about it, but in talking with some of my colleagues, particularly in the K-12 sector, how many of those families that live in remote areas just flat didn't have internet access. And even in cities, we all assume everybody's got at-home internet, and that's really not a valid assumption. So, where do they go to go online and such? And then the third big thing that I've seen, probably more so in higher education, but to some degree, certainly in K-12 education, is that the faculty, the teachers, had a difficult time trying to create an engaging virtual environment. So much of our life is spent in that traditional role where we go in, we teach, we lay out our lesson plans, we get up, we engage with the students, and away we go. But the reality is, some of us could adapt to a different kind of environment, perhaps because we had experiences in these areas. But for many, we just kind of threw them in and said, oh, by the way, next Monday you're online. So without any training, without limited, technological support, because we were all in such a state of flux, but just simply creating a conducive learning and virtual environment, online environment. So those are three big challenges that I saw: the at-home stress, the access to quality education online, and just that inability, I think, across the planet to create an engaging environment in a virtual or online situation.
Very good points, Dr. Olin. We're going to ask a similar question to Dr. Jeanette Patterson regarding our public K through 12 system. Our public K through 12 system has experienced a large impact due to COVID-19, as we all know. How has COVID-19 pandemic impacted the public school system?
Yes, thank you, Karen. Dr. Ivy, it has been devastating, and it's just been really hard. The one major challenge that we have is that students have been impacted by the loss of learning. And so we're not talking about that whole summer slump where you have a couple of months off and you're not learning and then teachers can catch you up. We're talking about from a couple of quarters where students are not able to have that rigorous classroom learning that they've had when they're in front of their teacher, because online learning is not as rigorous as being in front of the teacher. I believe that we're in the heart business, and with us being in the heart business, we have to have that human connection. And so, Dr. Olin, you talked a little bit about this with being connected to one another. So when students learn, they learn because the teacher is connected to them and they're connected to the teacher. And so we're talking about our workforce here. It's a huge impact because when students have this gap, and in maybe 3 to 4 years from now, we're going to see the gap continue. We're going to see the gap continue, but we also have to think outside the box in terms of having interventions that are set up for our students so we can catch them up. The second one is a concern is that the teachers, we struggled when we started this remote learning. Some of our teachers did not have the technology background to teach their kids remotely. And so we had to do a lot of training in regards to making sure that our teachers had the skills that they needed to teach. This fall, we incorporated some new curriculum. And so now it's new curriculum, as well as virtual learning, as well as teaching remotely. So it's just been a devastating impact, but we're getting through it and we're managing through it. Teachers had to teach students how to work with their students on the device, as well as making sure students were paying attention. We have some students that are left home alone because some of our parents are those essential workers. And with them being essential workers, they cannot be at home with their students. And so they may have an older sibling that is at home with them, as well as a grandparent, or students may be alone. And so that's been pretty impactful. A couple other things is that our parents had to get devices. And when they get devices, we are in a language learning district where it's not as easy to get on a device if you haven't ever used a device. And so we had to do some training around parents being on devices. And our district has also had to scramble just to make sure that we got devices to the families and so that students would have their device. But Dr. Olin, you talked about connectivity, and that's been a major issue in terms of making sure that everyone can get connected to learn. What's happening this fall and in the state of Colorado is that a number of students have not shown up to school. And so with us not showing up to school, we've lost some students. And so we have to make sure we have to find those students because we're all online in our district, but in other districts, they are hybrid. And so the state of Colorado has lost students, and which impacts funding. And so when you don't have the number of students you have, then your funding goes down. So it's been challenging, but we're managing through it.
Definitely so. And Ms. Aubrey, you teach in the public school systems as well. Are you seeing something similar?
Very similar. I kind of took the same approach. She mentioned funding was changed.
Mm-hmm.
I understand funding's changed. I've seen a change of standards. You know, we were taught you teach these standards always, and then suddenly it's like, well, with online, we're changing the standards you have to teach. So the biggest impact for me, kind of trying to not repeat what Dr. Peterson said, was that we went from not just providing education. I think the school districts, if we've learned anything, we provided daycare. We provided meals for students that couldn't afford meals. And I think the hardest thing was going from providing special education services for special education students, medical care for those children that come to school and have medical needs, social needs for those with, that need a little bit of social help. The change has now become, how do we do this distance? So we had to shift the entire education system. I think that's been the toughest for me as a teacher, shifting, as we mentioned, online. But also, we have to figure out how to provide all these needs that all these families have deserved and received for years in a safe way. So how do we adapt? We have changed from in person, and now we're mixing, just like we mentioned, to hybrid models where students are going to be coming back part-time now, hopefully, and some staying at home full-time. So we're mixing these systems. So we have cafeteria workers making meals here and handing them out on buses or having them ready for pickup. So everybody has changed the way we do things to adapt to the needs of COVID, because we aren't just an education system. We are a daycare, we are a nutrition system, we are a social system. We meet the emotional needs for, as you mentioned, some kids don't have anyone at home. We have foster children. We have, just difficult situations that we care for, not only in an educational standpoint, but in other ways. So the difficult thing for me was to shift everything to how we meet those needs, present at school, distance, or a mix of both now.
Definitely, Ms. Aubrey. Dr. Lisi, globally, internationally, what changes are you seeing? You're on mute, Dr. Lisi. Dr. Lisi. There you go, unmute. Zoom Master, can you assist in unmuting? Thank you.
I have unmuted. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was saying that, yes, in terms of out here, let me put it that way, among the challenges that we had, the first one that, we experienced was the fact that, we are used to have for students to come in person and in face-to-face, and all of a sudden, students had to go. So it caused, the immediate challenge was, it caused the disruption to the academic calendar. So it retarded the progress in some institutions because most of the institutions were not ready for such kind of, a pandemic. So they had not started preparing for online, even though my own university, fortunately, we were ready. So our calendar was not disrupted. We just immediately moved to online, but not so many other universities. But also another challenge that we have in terms of international and global is that, because of all the travel bans, the students, some of them got stuck. Some of them had gone on holidays and they were supposed to come back. Some of them were in the country and they were supposed to go. So they kind of, they were stranded. They couldn't travel. So we had to make arrangements for to accommodate such kind of students until such a time that they can be able to travel. And those that were outside, we had to immediately start finding ways of providing your, online learning, because, that's the only way they could continue. And some of them didn't have the facilities. So there were all these challenges that we were facing as a result of that, cross-border students, especially, as well as even internally, we had also other challenges that the students left. Not everybody had the equipment, the IT equipment, to be able to connect and learn online. So we had to start now working on what can we do, and furthermore, challenges of connectivity, because we have load shedding as well in most of these countries where you don't have power. So you might be wanting to give a lesson, but then other people might not be able to log in because they don't have the power, to connect to you. So all these challenges, we had to really sit and say, how can we help? And we had to make all sorts of arrangements and all that. So it's not just the Zambian, but also other neighboring countries and African countries especially had a lot of challenges in that regard. Some of them could not continue, but however, we have now kind of bounced back.
Yes, yes. Challenge is the word that I heard from each of you. Now, I'm going to remind us all as panel members to keep our talk to the limit because we have a lot of great information to share.
Oh, yes.
And speaking of challenges, Mr. Mark, as we go future forward now, looking beyond COVID-19, what are some of those long-term changes you see for the education industry?
Well, let me step back since you gave me the long term. I'll take it as the big picture question. The first thing we should keep in mind is it may not feel that way right now, months into the pandemic, but pandemics don't last forever, right? This will pass. We will have cures, therapeutics, likely a lot of vaccines. Life will start to look a little more normal at some point. That has implications in the long term. The COVID pandemic, some people have called, I think it's a good way to look at it, is the great accelerator, as opposed to something that changes everything permanently. What it's done is accelerated trends that are already underway. And in education, the two trends that I find fascinating that have a lot of implications for business and policy are demographic. And it's interesting, the two big demographic trends are different for the two parts of the world. And you know what I mean when I say two parts of the world. I mean we'll call it the mature economies with old people that are getting older, fewer children. The challenge that the COVIDs, if you like, have created is that the reskilling, re-education, ongoing education challenge. The change in the structure of workforce that's coming was happening already. It's got accelerated, right, with the unemployment and the change in business. So we need to find ways to re-educate, retrain, upskill, reskill adults. And we have to do that differently than we train children. I'm telling you as educators, it's obvious, but in every respect, we have to do it different. But at the center of it will be technologies, particularly like we're talking about today. At the other end of the demographic spectrum is where most of the humans in the world live, where we have younger demographic, and the world's biggest increase in demand for K through 12 education that's ever been experienced. I mean, just simply a tsunami of young people coming up through all the nations of the world, especially Africa. And I'm telling, Dr. Duyami, something you know very well. Africa is a young nation. K through 12 is critical. So the productivity requirements, to use economics terms, of getting maximum quality education with limited resources to the maximum number of people, it's not a trivial challenge. Technology will help on that. So those, to me, are the two macro things that are in play, and they just got accelerated. We accelerated our attention to them, and we'll accelerate now, I hope and believe, sort of innovators to find ways to bring solutions to it. And this is not a promotion for the Forbes School of Business Technology in Ashford, but that is by definition at the epicenter of the toolkit, not the only toolkit, but a critical toolkit.
Well, Mr. Mark, we will take that Forbes School of Business and Technology, definitely developing leaders to handle these challenges. And when we talk about those challenges and how they have been accelerated, Dr. Jeanette, when you look at education, has there been a change to education forever? What do you think?
Well, I'm not for sure if there's been a change forever, but there has been a change. And I think with COVID coming into play, I think this is the time where we're going to see the birth of the online schools, especially for those districts that cannot create those schools. And so now you have an avenue of online schools being created in all districts. Teachers will have to change their instructional practices because technology is going to always be in the classroom from now on. Even if we go back to face-to-face for all of our students, we will see a lot of technology. The one area that I think we'll see more of is personalized learning, where students are able to set their own pace on how they'll learn, which I believe will help with the opportunity gap and the digital divide, because now students will have devices in their hands to make sure that they have an opportunity for all students to learn. And so that's where I see us going in the future.
Personalized learning, definitely. I definitely agree with that. So, Dr. Olin, when we think of current changes across industries and how that's forcing innovation, because I know in a lot of different ways we all have had to become more innovative in what we're doing, a question for you. As we look at industry demands on innovation, what do you feel will be the most ideal learning structure for K through 12, universities and colleges and other organizations? And you're muted, Dr. Olin.
Now I am. So, yeah, looking out, my area of focus has been on higher education, and I think in terms of areas of innovation, back in the 90s, we all went to the seminars that talked about the flipped classroom model. The idea that students would do their homework to learn the material, then come to the classroom to have discussions and application exercises, small group activities and such. And we all kind of watched that and said, yep, that all sounds good, and yeah, let's go do that. The reality is a lot of schools and educators did not do that. Innovative schools like Ashford certainly did in the way it teaches in an online environment. But the reality is a lot of schools did not do that. You can still go to schools, 9 months ago where you would walk in and it's the professor, he's lecturing, all right, everybody go home and now do your homework. And there's very little interaction and engagement. But the innovation, I think, that the COVID times have brought to us is the reality is that flipped classroom model is the standard that we need to do. And that when we come together, whether we're in the classroom physically in person or we're together in a virtual environment, allow the information to get learned offline outside the classroom, and then use and leverage the power of whether it's virtual or face-to-face for the engagement, for the discussion, to stimulate the critical thinking. That's the innovation that, as Mark talked about, was starting and that hopefully we see as a positive trend, both in higher education and to a degree in K-12 education. That's probably the main focus of innovation, is that adapting our learning style, our teaching styles to foster critical thinking and engagement.
Thank you, Dr. Olin. And as you talked about fostering that innovation, stimulating critical thinking and other things, Dr. Lisi, from your view, the same question, what do you see that learning institutions should do to help to foster the innovative juices for people? You're muted, Dr. Lisi. Zoom mask, there you go. We can hear you now.
Sorry, you see, I'm in a different place, in some hotel somewhere after my, so the gadget I'm using, sorry about that. You see, in terms of, if we are looking again at the like learning structures and all that, in terms of our environment, I don't think it will be possible to completely move, for example, from blended learning. We have to go the blended learning way. In other words, after face-to-face and virtual learning is likely to continue for quite a while as strategies as we invest in IT, because our IT levels in the African continent is not at the same level as other places. So we still have to invest a lot in IT, and we have to ensure that both the government and the institutions invest in helping each and every learner to have a gadget that they can use to access education. And already we are having challenges because we are not able, like in your case, almost every child now has got a laptop or a gadget in their hands that they can use. We are not yet at that level. So we have to start now working on how we can best, use blended learning, and also trying to find ways of providing financial aid, to students, so that they can remain full-time, as well as providing support, like a college wellness kind of program within the learning institution. And so, in terms of us, it's different because of the limited kind of resources, as in Africa. But we have no choice but to go that way. everybody now knows that we have no choice if we are going to live under the new normal, but to urgently look into means and ways of supporting our learners so that they are able, to continue with their education using different kind of technologies, in spite of the, the remote areas where we are, because in some places they are in remote areas, like I was saying. So it's difficult, but however, we have to find ways of ensuring that each and every student come along. We can no longer continue with the brick and mortar, which is costly as well, but we can no longer continue with that. So we just have to go beyond the brick and mortar and say we are going to have to use ICTs, or ITs, as you say. We say ICTs, you say ITs, to ensure that each and every child is not left behind. To bring about that transformation that we require for us to move ahead and not be left behind again, because the continent usually is left behind. But this time we are determined to do whatever we can to ensure that no one is left behind.
I love that, Dr. Lisi, and I love your statement where we have no choice. We have to invest. Betsy in the chat said that adults have to adopt to a new learning method, right? And so as we think about lessons learned, we have been doing this for a little bit. And let's look right now, what have we learned that we can apply toward the future? So Ms. Aubrey, as we look at the COVID shutdown and what we have learned so far, what can be applied toward the future for education?
Trying to see what I can say that hasn't already been said. There's so many great ideas. I think we've learned, kind of to sum it up, flexibility and compassion. I've mentioned before, I wholeheartedly feel the pandemic showed that the K-12 system doesn't just educate academically. We have learned that we need to be flexible and figure out how to still continue all of these supports in other ways. So different learning styles is nothing new to teachers. We are pros. We are used to changing things up in the classroom, audio, visual, all these things, and suddenly it's shifted. So now it should be ideally a combination of pre-recorded videos for those that can't watch, live lessons throughout the day, live lessons for those that, can do it, paper packets, mailed out for those that don't have any internet access, unfortunately. I also think we've kind of learned, it has been mentioned, that we need to shift the system. K-12 has some online opportunities, but not many until this. I do have the advantage of the college and, the kindergarten experience. So it works great in college. It is amazing to see how you can self-pace and go at your own. And it's been a little different for the lower grades, but some children are still thriving. So I do think as we move forward, I would love to see more K-12 online opportunities for self-paced. I would also like to see, even in a traditional model, let's go back to normal. I've had students break a leg and be out of school for 3 weeks. I'd love to see the model that we've learned works applied to those that are chronically ill or injured, or even I don't have to travel, taking a 2-week vacation or something, because we have proved that it is capable of working. And I'd love to see it not, the norm, but a choice, not because of a pandemic, but because it's an awesome process for a self-paced learner.
Definitely, Aubrey. And I liked how you said we need to shift our directions. And speaking of shifting our directions, Mr. Mark, from a prediction standpoint, as we look future forward, education, across education industries, what new educational industries do you think may emerge after COVID-19?
You know what they say about predictions, but I'll say again, I think the challenge with predictions is knowing what things can't change and things that can change. And so things that don't change are things that you shouldn't change, by the way. We have centuries of experience. In fact, we have millennia of experience with how people learn, right? We can go back to Aristotle's Lyceum. We know how children learn. And you learn that as a teacher. Those things don't really change. So technologies, if you track the core metric of education, which is literacy, There are other things that are relevant, let's stipulate, but literacy is a thing we can track. And there's pretty much universal agreement on how you define literacy, within reasonable boundaries. The world is gone in a century from where only 14% of the population of the planet was literate a century ago to today where only 14% are defined as illiterate. It's astonishing. And it's a straight line trend, and it doesn't have any bumps along the way as new technologies like TV or video or slide projectors or mimeograph, or none of it moved the meter. What moved the meter was wealth. As nations became wealthy enough to have the ability to send kids to school, hire teachers, literacy rose. I say that because to me, the big revolution that and this is my soapbox, that matters the most for education is having a society is wealthy enough they can afford it. So that's not a specific educational goal, but it is the overriding goal. But the thing that's different going forward is something that, Aubrey, you talked about. In fact, everybody sort of hinted at it. The new technology is different in one way. It's not a new way to distribute lectures. It is that. Remember the MOOCs? Remember 10 years ago? MOOCs were going to change everything. You don't even hear the word MOOC anymore. It's gone. Gone. What happened? Well, it turns out there's more to a lecture than just distributing it. Otherwise, you just videotape. You could send a Betamax out back in the day, for those who remember what a Betamax was, as opposed to VHS. What's different now is that the technology we have today will actually, and I'll use the word amplifier, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the nature of computation today is different in the sense that it will amplify the skills of teachers. It'll amplify administrators to some extent. I think it'll replace administrators, by the way. That's what way word processing replaced typing pools. AI will replace a lot of administrative burdens and makes them easier. But the most important prediction I will make is the ability for a AI-driven, computer-centric tool to amplify your ability as a teacher. Trivial example, whether it's in person, you can tell when the student's paying attention and getting it. You can tell. You can see it in their eyes, right? Really hard on a computer, on Zoom. There's, machine learning AI chips now can help you do that in Zoom. And that's no longer a crazy thing. The computer's not going to teach the class. There's not going to be robo teachers. There'll be robo helpers making teachers more effective. We'll upskill teachers. And not that teachers aren't skilled, but we'll upskill them because of AI. I think that's the single most interesting transformation in education. And Ira, you made the point. Teachers are extremely adaptive because they have to be. So they'll adopt these tools, I think, extraordinarily fast and this great acceleration.
This is awesome. And you're talking about artificial intelligence. Just this week, myself and a couple of peers at Forbes School of Business and Technology did a presentation on AI in education. If it is not already where you are, it is coming your way, right, Mark? Exactly. So, okay, future forward. 2020 is the year. Let's advance ourselves now 10 years down the road. I'm going to ask this question to both Dr. Olin and Dr. Lisi. 20 years down the road, would we consider that we more so have moved in a transformative period, a period of transformation, or would people say that it was a missed opportunity? 20 years down the road, we'll start first with Dr. Olin. What do you think?
Well, it's certainly my hope that we do look back on this time 10 years from now as a period of transformation. But that's only predicated on the idea that we as leaders and we as parents, grandparents, whatever that might look like, help foster this. Many of you, I had to go home during the early part of the pandemic and lock myself in my basement in my home office there for a few weeks. And I used some of that time to go back on a project I'd been wanting to work on for a number of years. And that was putting together a little bit of a timeline book of my grandmother. Now, my grandmother passed away in 2002. She was 101 years old. And I kind of parked her stuff there in my basement and finally looking at her photo albums, I want to get this out and do something with it. And so as I'm piecing together her timeline, it was really bugging me that she graduated high school when she was 22 years old. Now, my grandmother went on, she taught school for 45 years in K-12 education. And it was really bugging me that she graduated when she was 22 years old. And I thought I probably made a mistake somewhere until I found her diploma. And sure enough, Hilltop, Colorado is where she graduated from, down by your neck of the woods down there. And sure enough, she was graduated in 1922 at the age of 21. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And then I found this note that said that she didn't go to school. She missed her 9th and 10th grades because they closed the school for 2 years because of the flu. And it dawned on me that she survived the Spanish pandemic of 100 years ago. It gave me hope to think about, here she went on, Mark said, this too shall pass. But, you know, she went on, she taught for 45 years. What was that experience of her living at home, missing 2 years of school, having to make them up, and then eventually graduating when she was 21 years old? She went on to college. She came up here to Northeast Wyoming, went into a small school, literally a one-room schoolhouse, and taught 5 kids in a family. But what did she learn from that? The idea of individualized education, the idea of building relationships, the idea of blending together subjects in a curriculum. She didn't teach English from 9 to 10 and then social studies from 10 to 11. It was all woven together. And I think therein lies one of the great learning lessons I hope we bring out of this pandemic, is this idea of weaving together the education so it is in totality as opposed from subject to subject to subject, because that's really messing up the kiddos right now in an online situation. So I look back, I hope we look back 10 years from now and truly say this was a period of transformation, because we learn from these experiences and we adapted them to improve education down the road when we get back to, quote unquote, a new normal. Thank you.
Excellent, Dr.
Well,
Go ahead, Dr. Lisi. Same question.
well, thank you very much. With me, I can say a definite period of transformation, because COVID-19 has really changed the way of life and our approach, you know, especially as higher education people, to teaching and learning. It has changed definitely. So if you look at, you know, the pandemic has forced us to reevaluate our own definition of the teaching environment. We have to evaluate it. We now know that we can still learn and teach without the need for expensive brick and mortar facilities. Like I said, Africa, as you know, has the youngest, like I was saying, population in the world. We now know that we can rely more and more on technology to help educate our fast growing student population. It would be, of course, a period of missed opportunities only for those who failed or delayed to be creative and adopt new ways of teaching and learning using ITs. Then it would be a missed opportunity. But like according to UNESCO, on 1st April 2020, schools and higher education institutions were closed in 185 countries, affecting 1.5 billion learners, which constitutes 89.4% of total enrolled learners. So this also has led to an increase, of course, in student dropout due to financial challenges, especially in poor economies where government and parents cannot afford, like I said, to, you know, IT support equipment. But also, this economic slowdown may create both, of course, challenges and opportunities for graduate enrollment, as the job-seeking population seeks price competitive education as a means of gaining a competitive edge for when the economy bounces back. So at the end of the day, when it definitely is an opportunity. Only people who were not ready or cannot see it still will remain behind. Because I think everybody knows there are so many opportunities. Can you imagine right now? I'm here in Zambia, in Livingstone. I was just having another whole day session of a conference. We are here to interact. Why? Forced by COVID-19. Otherwise, I would have been there right now, sitting next to you. And imagine the hassles of the visas, the hassles of the cross-border costs and all that. So at the end of the day, in as much as this is really a challenge, it's an opportunity. If you are, forward-thinking, if you not even think outside the box, just break the box and move forward and say we have to ensure that each and every person, we take them with us and must be able to learn, go to school and have education, be it in their home, be it in their village, wherever they may be. We have to ensure that we take everybody with us, so that we can contribute to even our vision 2030 as we have set for ourselves.
We move together, the direction of transformation. I'm voting for that too, versus missed opportunities. So we're going to remind everyone, use chat. Go ahead and put questions into the chat area. If we don't get a chance to, the panel doesn't get a chance to address those questions during the session, following the session is continue the conversation, and we'll be able to address those questions there. We're going to go into the panel lightning round. This is exciting, really exciting. 1 minute you have for an answer. And the question to the panel members, where we will be starting off with Dr. Olin, is education and beyond COVID-19. Where do we go from here?
A couple of years ago, I was in Ghana, and I was talking to a recent MBA graduate. And I was asking her, as you look back on your career, your education here, what was your favorite class? And she talked about it. And I asked her, why was it your favorite class? And she said something truly remarkable that I wrote down, and it's here on my wall. She says, I learn best when I participate in my own learning. And it's become a guiding principle for me as an instructor. Where do we go from here? Individualized, customized, engaged learning opportunities. The students are no longer passive customers. They are now active in this process. And their expectations of us as instructors has never been higher and will not go backwards post-COVID.
All right, thank you, Dr. Olin. Ms. Aubrey, same question to you. Where do we go from here?
As I mentioned before, I think this opens up the opportunity to have more online distance models for K-12. It's popular for college, has been for years, but not in our K-12 sector. I'd like to see it, like I said, used for children that are medically fragile or just can't be at school. I'd also like to see, like I said, the flexibility and compassion that we've learned. We've mentioned the compassion for the low income. We are now focusing on meals and providing internet and services and packets and whatever we need to do to those that don't have the normal experience. So forward, I say flexibility and compassion is kind of the wave of the future.
All right, thank you, Ms. Aubrey. Mr. Mark Mills, education and COVID-19, where do we go from here?
Well, I won't repeat. I agree with Aubrey on the K through 12 dynamic. The university one is different. Let me just briefly address that, because we prepare kids to have a educated life, to be educated citizens. They don't have to go to university, but universities become the sine qua non, of course. I hope what we will accelerate are two things. These skills development for people who are not interested in or not suitable for a university kind of education. I don't mean that in a condescending way. That's just not their cup of tea. Right. We need a greater focus on that. It used to be called vocational education. Very bad word these days. It's not vocational. It's different skills. At the university side, the enduring challenge is to cut how much it costs. I mean, as and their technology does have a role. It won't be easy. Got to do it, because the burden on so many students that choose to get a university education is far too high. It makes it non-inclusive by definition, because it excludes people who don't have wealth.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Very good point. Dr. Jeanette, education, COVID-19, where do we go from here?
So I think that, and I agree with Aubrey and Dr. Olin and Mark in regards to what they're saying. I think personalized learning is the way that we need to go. We need to embrace this change and be open to a new way of learning, and we need to soar like eagles. I think if we just soar and we just hope that the best will come out with everyone just jumping on a board to this new adventure, I know that we will be successful, because this opens opportunities for all. And so I think when we look at our opportunities and we do the things that everyone has mentioned prior. I think we're going to see the green industry come out, energy efficient jobs. We're going to see engineering. We're going to be farming. We're climate change. Kids are going to be looking at the problems they need to solve, especially with food deserts, studying abroad. I mean, this just opens the door for everything for our students. And so I agree with everyone else in terms of how we want to move forward as a district and as a country and as a world.
Thank you, Dr. Jeanette. And Dr. Lisi, final word from us. Where do we go?
Thank you very much. All I can say is that right now, institutions will be digital first. That is, we have to go digital first and incorporating essential face-to-face learning, but via technology. Extended period of online delivery, having strong capabilities with a major differentiator in the market, along with the marketing and branding in different places. And also, there will also be increased remote work for staff and faculty. We have to consider the possibility of hiring, retaining, and retraining academic luminaries, otherwise unavailable for in-person instruction or guest speaking opportunities. Also, there are more opportunities to utilize high-quality faculty from across the globe in teaching, research, and consultants through enhanced technology, which were in the past limited to one physical space, but can now teach and interact with students and fellow faculty from anywhere in the world. Finally, cross-border visa complications and travel accommodation and lodging costs will be a thing of the past, since with IT, students can enroll in the institution of their choice and get the best desired education in the confines of their homes from anywhere over the world. They no longer have to say, I can't go to that place because of the travel, because of borders, because of what. They can just choose, they'll apply online, and if they get it, they will be able to get the education they require. The only thing that we have to address, of course, in the future is to ensure that we have the resources to do it. And that's, like I'm saying, that's what we are trying to work on. Because we have, as you know, Africa have the natural resources, but we don't have the money, because we end up exporting raw materials and importing finished products. So we are trying to change that as well, so that we can also be independent. But above all, we need an appropriate, rare leadership. The leadership that is responsible, accountable, relevant, and ethical in its all conduct will be able to always ensure that they provide the requisite skills and competences to the people, to the staff, to everybody else. But if we have a leadership that has got debased the value system, we will still not be able to go there, because the people will only be looking for opportunities for themselves and not being responsible, accountable, relevant, and ethical in their conduct. Thank you very much. I hope that was within a minute.
Yes, it was. So there we have it, panel. You guys have been just excellent as a team. We have focused on, we're rooting for transformation. We're not rooting for us being considered as missed opportunities because we did not step forward. Your insights, invaluable, very, very pristine, and very much appreciated. And so thank you to Mr. Mark Mills, Dr. Jeanette Patterson, Ms. Aubrey Kura, Dr. Olena Odukovan, and also Dr. Ngambi, as we call her, Dr. Lisi. I'm Dr. Karen Ivey. We have enjoyed bringing to you this panel today. Remember, following this, we have continued the conversations where we've had some fantastic questions presented in the chat. Thank you very much. And as we bring forward our MC, Brandy Havens, we are going to turn the floor over to Miss Brandy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ivy, and to our distinguished panel members.